Nigeria's crude oil production has been witnessing significant drops for some years now, as the country last recorded a 1.4 million barrels per day in 2020. According to OPEC, a newly released report, oil market report for September, Nigeria's crude oil output fell to 900,000 barrels per day in the month of August this year. That's leading to a slump in government crude revenue. This development, amongst other issues, has been attributed to the untamed monster called crude oil theft, which has been gaining momentum in recent times, causing adverse effects to the country's external reserve base and the entire performance of the economy. I have joining me again via Zoom is an energy lawyer and analyst, is Dr. Ayodele Oni. Dr. Oni, thank you so much. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much for having me. Good afternoon.
Yes, first I'd like us to stay with what President Buhari said at the United Nations General Assembly. Of course, the issue around climate change, shift to green energy, and all of that came up. What is your take, and how well are we moving towards that energy transition?
Okay, I think energy transition is inevitable. However, we need to consider that we have substantial energy poverty to start with, even with our enormous gas resources, and overall hydrocarbon resources. So we need to tread cautiously. Whilst we should not be left behind, we need to negotiate what works for us, because it's about our interest. The West looks at their own interests first. If you recall, recently, Germany and certain other countries in the West were even beginning to look at look at nuclear energy because of the war in Russia and Ukraine. The West changes its mind when the indices do not favor the West, But as long as it continues to favor the West would ask for a leg and an arm. So we need to be careful. We need to tread cautiously. We need to negotiate what works for us as a country and as a continent. Whilst we will transition gas, for example, we should negotiate gas as a transition fuel. The West is beginning to consider gas as even green. I've heard that debate, so that they can, at least for now, use more of gas. With the challenges around, with the challenge discussed by the war between Russia and Ukraine, everyone is beginning to see that renewables can't move as fast as it's expected. Also, the financial commitment is huge. So we need a situation where, and like he asked for debt forgiveness, I mean, you can negotiate all sorts. Because I even think it's a desperate time for the West. That's why you begin to hear them say they would even be willing to support in building infrastructure that connects our gas to their own load or their own demand centers for their own gas. So I think it's a good time to negotiate. I think, yes, we should be moving towards net zero and energy transition, but I think we should move more slowly, more cautiously, and negotiate that gas continues to play a substantial role for some time to come. That's my view.
I want to ask you, are you one of those that believe that we need crude oil to move away from fossil fuel and, of course, move to cleaner energy, but we still need the proceeds from crude to, actualize this transformation?
Yes, I mean, different people would have different debates. And one thing I say is that, so yes, I am to a large extent. I'm pro-Trump when it comes to energy policy. I'm closer to Trump than elsewhere. I think that the West developed using dirty energy, coal, and all of that. First industrial revolution, second industrial revolution. You hear the role of even coal, But if we haven't developed, if we need to industrialize, and coal and crude is readily available, why not? Even in terms of emissions, China, Europe, Canada, US still does emit more than the entirety of sub-Saharan Africa if we took away South Africa. So what's the debate? It's not really true. I mean, I'm not sure if you saw that chart that was making the rounds a while ago, that countries like Canada, the US, the UK are telling us to stop using gas, but they emit much more than we do. And the graph was there, the chart was there. So I think we still need our crude. I think we just need to be reasonable in making the most of it as quickly as we can before it wouldn't completely be phased out, but it's important to continue to weigh with EV vehicles, with electric vehicles, and all of those. It's important to continue to weigh. But if you look at every industrial processes, you find that it's very difficult. And in your home, you probably have renewable, you probably have solar, and you can't use your solar for your AC. So for every production, industrialization, it's still a big debate whether renewables can do it, at least now. So I think crude still does have a role. There's a lot of energy poverty in this part of the world. We need to deal with that as we deal with or as we try to transition. So dealing with energy poverty is important, and crude and gas will play a substantial role anyway.
Which is eating deep into our market, of course, and even affecting revenue that ought to be generated by government. We are doing less than 1 million barrels per day, far below OPEC's quota. We've talked about this before, I'm sure, but what is happening? What do you think is happening? Do you think anything can change this narrative?
Okay, it's a tough one, but I think government is now beginning to deal with it head on. You're aware of the contract they've entered into with certain people in the Niger Delta itself. The role of the PIA with respect to host communities and trust arrangements for them, the oil companies being the settlers, all of those. If you deal with something from its root, the root cause, then you're likely to succeed. It may not be immediate, but you're likely to succeed more than you will if you were cutting the branches. So at this time, I think government is doing a lot to deal with it, the root cause. Now, the private sector too is doing a lot. Private sector doing a lot in terms of finding alternative means, because the private sector too is suffering. I mean, if the volume of crude you sell is dependent on how much the private sector too can produce, because overall the NNPC probably holds less than 60% of the entirety of production. So if that's the case, it then means that the private sector does have 40%, which is substantial. So in that case, the private sector is going to push, because the private sector wants to make money. They've invested risk capital, and they want to make profit. So there's a lot going on, and I'm involved in a number of them where we are negotiating alternative means for evacuation. And I think that's part of the solutions to that problem. It's more expensive, but ultimately should solve a substantial part of that problem. One, two, that contract too, coming from indigene or working with an indigene, I think it's from Polo or so, working with an indigene of the Niger Delta. I think that too could go a long way in substantially reducing the theft. The thing is, once you know that they're going to steal a substantial part of your product, you rather keep it than try to get it sold and 90, 80, 70%, whatever percentage of that is stolen. So that's what's happening. A lot of them are shutting in because of the volume of theft. But I think that this will begin to reduce in the next few weeks.
Moving forward, because Nigeria's oil and gas industry remains very strategic, particularly when it comes to revenue for government. So we must take all of this very seriously. Now, what is your outlook for the market, the entire market at this time? What is your outlook moving on in 2022 as we move to an election year?
Okay, I thought governance was going to grind to a halt, but it looks like that might not completely be the case in this instance. There's a lot the government is grappling with, a lot to negotiate, a lot to discuss in the Committee of Nations, and I think that internationally, the Ukraine-Russia war may end before the end of the year. The effects will not completely cease, and the effects will still be there. So I don't expect the price of crude to drop to the pre-war prices, but I don't expect that they will continue to increase anyway. That's one point. And if we can get our act together very soon, in terms of production, we should be able to generate enough revenue. You hear of Saudi Arabia and a number of countries making much more than they had made in a while from sale of crude oil, and that this goes to the pricing, you know. So if we can get our acts together, we should be able to make more of it. We hear the vice president say the right things. The president did say a number of interesting things. We have an energy transition plan at the moment. You know, Nigerians have brilliant policies about implementation. If we can implement all of this, work with the private sector, improve the power sector, I think that subsidy, I mean, before the end of the year, I understand subsidies, they are looking at June 2023 to remove subsidies. You know, so for that, I'm not sure how profitable the NNPC will be, having to continue to pay subsidy for the rest of the year. I'm not sure if the situation will change substantially, but in terms of the outlook, I think oil prices will still be reasonably high, but it wouldn't continue to be what it is at the moment. It will continue to drop and has dropped and been dropping. But I don't expect that it will be less than what it was before now. In terms of gas will continue to play a substantial role as some projects finish, and government is working hard to finish a number of gas transmission projects, pipelines, and all of that. We'll be able to sell more of our gas. There's more interest in our gas, and we should be able to generate more revenue from that, unlike crude. So that's what I see in terms of pricing, in terms of where we are in the world with respect to crude availability. Energy supply, energy security challenge will continue to be a challenge. The Dangote refinery, I understand, will be ready any moment from now, will not substantially reduce the price of petroleum products, but will reduce it a bit because there are 7 other items when you import petroleum products. And if those items can go off, then there'd be a reduction. I don't know if it will be more than 10 or 20%. I mean, now and even when subsidies removed. Because when subsidies removed, the prices are going to go up. But they won't be as high as they would have been if we were to import the petroleum products we use. So that's what I see for the rest of the year. Yes, that's what I see for the rest of the year, particularly with respect to all that.
In 1 minute, any talks about refining? We hear that the Port Harcourt refinery might get to work anytime soon.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's correct. The Port Harcourt refinery will get to work anytime, but that doesn't nearly meet our daily requirements anyway. So yes, such situations can help reduce the impact, but it will be very minimal, very, very minimal for now. Any impact will be very, very minimal.
I must thank you so much, energy lawyer and analyst there, Dr. Ayo Deleoni. Thank you so much. Do enjoy the rest of your day. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the rest of the day too.